Welcome back to the latest edition of The Audible, presented by Trader Joe's. I'm Bruce Feldman, joined by my colleagues from The Athletic, Stuart Mandel and Ralph Russo. We just had a fun holiday Christmas break. It's good to be back with you guys. A lot of news to get to. We're going to talk about the big 4 playoff games that we got coming up in a few days. We're going to break those down. We're also going to break down what's kind of going on with the House settlement. Did anything really happen of note? Is it business as usual? Stu did a big story on it. We're going to get into that. Also, before I forget, don't forget, every episode of The Audible is on YouTube. Find us at Audible Show. Guys, there was some big news I think it was on Friday. It feels like all the days are blurring together. Out of Michigan, the story that won't go away. At least now Michigan has a new head coach. It's a guy we all know pretty well. Kyle Whittingham accepted the job, as Stu adeptly put it, when the news came out on another Friday that he was stepping down, not retiring. That was a distinction I think a lot of people missed, because he's 66 years old and had a head coach in waiting tag on Morgan Scalley for a while. All right, Stu, we've had a lot of thoughts on Michigan and the mess that it has been for a long time there. What do you think of the hire that they landed on?
I guess I was surprised, maybe less than some people, because it seemed like a possibility from the time that he in Utah announced he was stepping down, not retiring, as you said, Bruce. It was just something Michigan was interested in? And I think it's clear that after everything that's gone down, back to the Harbaugh days, but also obviously most recently with Sherrone Moore, they needed an adult in the room. And so they're hiring a guy who was a head coach for 21 years, and granted at one school. But, you're not dealing with a first-time head coach here. You're dealing with a guy who has a lot of experience running a program, and whose style, as we know, like play defense, smash mouth football, fits a lot with what Michigan likes to do. But yeah, I think it took a lot of people by surprise. Like you said, Bruce, I feel like they've been talking about a retirement plan for him for so long that honestly, Ralph, I was surprised that he is only 66. Like, you would think they were already putting out the pasture. He went 10-2 this year. He's not like some past his prime guy here. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, so I think a couple of things. First of all, we should all look as good as Kyle Whittingham when we get to 66 years old, by the way. Secondly, it did seem the Utah situation had gotten to a point where there was just this cloud hanging over the program of, is this Kyle's last year? Is this Kyle's last year? They knew Morgan was sitting there waiting for the job. And I do wonder if that became, maybe to a certain degree, we don't want to lose Scalley here, who's also a Utah guy. He's been here forever. I don't think Morgan was definitely was dying to leave. So we don't want to lose the guy we have all teed up. And it seems to be working against our program a little bit. The fact that we have this discussion every year about whether Kyle is, I think even Whittingham mentioned this at his press conference with Michigan, this idea that, it became a conversation around the program. So I find that to be interesting, how Utah felt like it had to move on from that. And then, for Michigan, I don't think they're looking for a 10-year head coach. They need a 5-year. They signed him to a 5-year deal. A 5-year head coach works just fine to sort of stabilize things there, plus a guy who has done the job well before. The other thing I'm interested, Bruce, you and I were texting a little bit about this offline. It is interesting that he was at Utah for so long. I was looking at the arc of his career, and there were definitely moments when you're like, boy, that would have been a good time for him to scoot and find something better. And I think it's a combination of I don't think he was going to leave for anything that could have been considered lateral, because he is a Utah guy and that's where his roots are. So I think his standard for what was going to pull him out of Utah was always very high. And very rarely did those jobs come open at a point where his stock was high. I was thinking, again, Bruce, I thought maybe USC, he was in consideration a couple of times, but I don't remember any other period where I thought, man, Kyle Whittingham almost left.
Yeah, I remember on this with him and USC, and to the point where, being a sideline reporter for one of the Utah games, I remember talking to him before one of our meetings and asking him, because his dad played for the Rams a long, long time ago. And I was like, did you live out here? Like, where did you guys live? And I think I'd asked that part. And I want to say, he had some time out here, but on paper, he would seem like exactly what USC people would want. USC people want smash mouth, student body right, gonna be physical, gonna play, kick your teeth in defense. And that's all he is about, right? And so there was 2 times when he was rumored to be a candidate. Again, once was after Clay Helton got fired. That wasn't that long ago, obviously. And then the other time before that was, I think, after Sark got fired, after he kind of imploded at USC. But I don't think he was ever really like a front runner candidate. I'm not sure how closely they really made a move on him at that point, which is kind of like, you and I were talking about this. It was like, what was the thing? I don't know if there were some USC people who didn't think that the offense was good enough. Because again, it had been up and down at times with him, depending on what the coordinator situation was, who was the offensive line coach. Obviously the defense and the linemen, and he's recruited and developed a lot of really good players out here on the West Coast. It's one of those things where I think if I ask both you guys and we run down the list of coaches who either have gotten a head coaching job, you'll be like, oh yeah, he would have seemed like a better fit than Clay Helton here. He would have seemed like a better fit than Sark, given the state of, what Sark was like at that point. But again, it was USC. They didn't go in that direction. I think from a Michigan standpoint now, it's what does the staff look like? Are they able to hold on to a lot of these guys they have, whether it's Bryce Underwood, who had a really up and down true freshman year, but obviously has a big price tag, and that'll be interesting because it didn't seem like, they were terrible on offense last year. They weren't that good on offense this year. They definitely got better, but again, they were kind of underwhelming on offense.
Super bad last year.
Like the run game is an interesting piece of this. So I'm fascinated to see how this goes going forward, because obviously, the expression Stu used is one that I think a lot of us have used before about needed an adult in the room, coming off of Sharon Moore. And we'll see what happens. Is the AD, Ward Manuel, going to survive this long term? How does this unfold? I don't think Kyle Whittingham getting this job is going to cover up all the deficiencies that seem to be going on at Michigan, right? You're going to get a new president coming in there soon. We'll see. I mean, but given what they were looking at the landscape, if I was a Michigan fan, I would at least be encouraged by his track record of the teams he's put on the field.
Yeah, Stu, it's just so interesting. I find myself thinking just like timing is everything in life. Like, the idea that when this job opened up and under the circumstances it opened up, whether you think Kyle Whittingham is a home run or like whatever you want to categorize him, that Michigan sort of fell ass backwards into a guy with a track record like Kyle Whittingham is, it seems to be kind of fortuitous, I would imagine.
Yeah, much like how Penn State ended up with Matt Campbell when they probably could have had him all along after all that. I'm not saying it's a home run by any means. I think it's not his age at all. He's only ever worked at that one place, and it's a completely different school. And we've seen coaches that were great at one place and then for whatever reason doesn't work out at the next. I think the good news for him, though, is this is not a rebuilding situation, right? As Bruce said, if he can hold on to the core of that roster, that young roster, he's got a team that can compete right away. He's bringing in, an offensive coordinator that had great success with him this year. Jay Hill, a very respected, the defensive coordinator off this BYU team. Like the pieces are there, right? And now it's just a matter of, hey, this is a big culture change. They're going outside the Harbaugh Michigan family for the first time in forever. We wish him luck and hope it's not a Rich Rod Michigan type situation, right? More of a much more positive situation than that.
I think it also speaks to this idea, what you just mentioned, why he was at Utah for such a long time. Again, I think there's a couple of things going on there. I don't think he was dying to get out of Utah. I think he understood he had a good situation there. And I also think that when you are in one place, because I know Bruce and I know you talked to so many coaches that you probably had this conversation about coaches who say, I think I need to get out of my comfort zone and maybe need to do it early in my career. Like I've been in this tree or I've been in this part of the country for such a long time. And if I don't get away from it, I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to. And to a certain degree, I think that the balance of those two things, A, he wasn't really looking to leave, and B, he had sort of pigeonholed himself inadvertently into being this West Coast, Western part of the country, Utah guy that I think that maybe limited him. And I do wonder if there are maybe some SEC schools and Big Ten schools who maybe didn't think we should go after Kyle Whittingham when they should have.
It's interesting, Ralph, because you did a good story, 3 weeks ago on Matt Campbell. And Matt Campbell is a guy who I think we all have a ton of respect for as a coach. He was actually at Iowa State for a long time.
10 years.
There was a lot of people who made the assumption he ain't going to leave there. Right. And so you just kind of think, oh, he's been there. They almost take him for granted that they've been there for that long. And it's interesting. Again, Stu, I think your categorization, you wouldn't call it a home run because you look back at some guys who were really good coaches at certain places and then they got hired somewhere else. And you're like, okay, this fit's going to be interesting, right? Look at Bronco Mendenhall leaves. Everybody's kind of surprised when he left to take the Virginia job. It obviously didn't go very well because he wasn't there very long. And it'll be, fit is important. Rich Rodriguez is a terrific coach. The timing there was not good. The fit there was not good, and it didn't work out. So we'll see.
All right. So last week we talked about, or I wrote about it a little bit while our guy Pete Sampson was taking a little break, our Notre Dame writer, how the USC-Notre Dame rivalry had fallen apart, right? Like they couldn't come to a terms on an agreement to continue the rivalry. Notre Dame signed up with BYU for the next couple of years, and for at least the next couple of years, and maybe even until 2030, that rivalry USC-Notre Dame is on hold. God love Lincoln Riley. He can't just let it be. And I'm sure he was asked about it. So they were at the Alamo Bowl. I think they're at the Alamo Bowl.
They're at the Alamo Bowl.
And I'm sure he was asked about it. So I don't want to necessarily be like, well, he just brought it up. I'm sure he was asked about it. But instead of punting or just saying, hey, we're moving on, Lincoln Riley threw 98 under the chin at Notre Dame, basically said, the series blamed Notre Dame, said if Notre Dame really wanted to play anytime, anywhere, Stu, this rivalry would still be going. So it's their fault, not ours. And Stu, I think Lincoln just needs to let it be. Maybe why did you need to do that? Why did you need to make another news cycle out of USC Notre Dame?
He has to do that because he knows he's being blamed for it. This whole thing has been a big exercise in spin, right? It comes out initially that it's canceled from the Notre Dame side because they go ahead and announce they're playing BYU, right? Like, oh, okay, something happened here, right? Then there was initially a weird USC through a reporter spin of, well, once we found out about this special clause they have in the CFP, like we would have played him, but then we found out about this. Yeah, and it's like, come on, you guys have known about that for 2 years. That's not the reason. It is. It's a exercise in spin. Lincoln is basically saying, because my whole thing with it is the whole reason USC is citing as why they need to change this, why it needs to be earlier in the season, is because they think playing them late in the season will hurt their playoff chances. They've never made the playoff. So this is an entirely theoretical thing. And by the way, Notre Dame lost early in the season this year and didn't make the playoff. To me, it's just a totally fake thing, right? There's no real overriding need to change this. And yet the Lincoln Riley, that's a very great way to rile up your fan base and say, like, see, it's their fault. Like, because they wouldn't change. They wouldn't play us in week 0. Like, why would they? Why would they want to do that? Like, it's not solving anything for them.
Lincoln Riley makes for a very good villain in college football. Like the Oklahoma fans, loathe him. And I think there's a lot of other fans that do. And there's a lot of times where he's been in front of a microphone and he said some things that just don't sit well with people. Like, it's almost like he can't help himself. What this has done, and look, I would nitpick on the words, Ralph. The rivalry is really going, because this has just stoked it. It's the series that's been kind of derailed. It's created an interesting subplot inside the USC football family, because I see, as somebody who works at Fox with both Petros Papadakis and Matt Leinart, there is sniping going back and forth about, how USC has handled this. It's interesting to see where you have, Keyshawn Johnson went off. It was like a 2 or 3 minute rant on social media that I think a lot of USC people agreed with. And, I think Matt took a different tact, and Petros has kind of jumped on him, and a lot of the USC people who have kind of taken the Lincoln Riley approach. It's different, because the Notre Dame side, I feel like is fairly unified on this, whereas the USC side is very fragmented.
That's an interesting point too. And that actually does explain why Lincoln Riley might be in position to sort of continue to defend himself a little bit. Notre Dame USC was also out in front of publicly stating reasons why it needed to change, right? So it does look like, we said this last week, I don't think Notre Dame is blameless, because if Notre Dame really, really wanted to keep playing USC, they probably could have figured out a way to keep playing USC. But hey, we don't want to play USC on USC's terms. That's fine. But you are right. Like, Notre Dame has coalesced around its leaders, so to speak, and been like, well, if they don't want to play us, that's fine. They're scaredy cats, right? Like, whether that's true or not, that's where the Notre Dame, I think Notre Dame fandom lies, where I think from USC, I don't know if they trust their leadership as much. And by the way, this is just my personal opinion. No offense to Matt Leinart or Keyshawn Johnson. Keyshawn was like my favorite Jet for a while when he first got drafted by the Jets. Petros will always be the voice of USC to me. If I want to know what the heartbeat of what's going on at USC, I would go to Petros first.
The one other point on that piece of it too, the juxtaposition of the timing of Lincoln Riley kicking up this dirt storm happened around the same time as Marcus Freeman getting a contract extension and basically announcing, "Hey guys, I know the NFL is interested in me, but I'm going to be the head coach of Notre Dame in 2026." Right. And so, whereas I think if the Giants offered Lincoln Riley, I think there's a lot of USC fans that go, "Do it, Lincoln. You got Jackson Dart. We can't wait to see what would happen there," kind of thing.
We need to take a break. And when we come back, it'll be time to talk about some transfer portal stuff.
All right, and we're back. And so a little news before we started recording today. A pretty big player is hitting the portal, at least according to reports that our colleagues at The Athletic have confirmed. Auburn wide receiver Cam Coleman is expected to go in January 2nd when the portal opens up for FBS football. Man, that's a guy who was a 5-star wide receiver recruit. Maybe didn't have the type of numbers that some of the guys in his class, like Jeremiah Smith, for example, have had. But you watch him play, and that could be the most valuable, especially non-quarterback in the portal when business does open in early January, at least officially opens in early January, which leads me to Stu's story on, there was supposed to be kind of a hard cap here in the revenue sharing era. Everybody had $20.5 million to work with, but Stu, it doesn't look like that's what's really happening. So can you give us an example of a couple of workarounds in this new era of revenue sharing? How, LSU can promise Lane Kiffin $30 million and Penn State can promise, reportedly Matt Campbell a $30 million roster when revenue sharing for all sports is supposed to be $20.5 million?
Yeah, I mean, as you guys know, from day one, I did not believe that the College Sports Commission and the NIL Go and all that was going to have these transformative effects I mean, I frankly last summer felt I was living in crazy town because you see these respected ADs say, well, that was the prices you saw, the amounts, like that was a one-time thing. That was a one-off thing. Now we're going to have regulation and everybody's salaries are going to go down. Not that they would ever use the word salary. And I was like, that's not my experience with anything in college sports. They always go up and up. And so the portal is underway, even if it's not officially open. And talking to GMs, I talked to agents, collectives about what they're seeing so far. And the consensus was, no, prices have gone up. That they keep going up. And part of that is obviously, now that schools can spend and generally in football, $13 to $15 million, like there are schools that didn't have that kind of money before, right? So that's a step up for them. But even for the LSUs, the top teams at the top bucket, like that's not enough. They want $25, $30 million rosters. So to your point, Ralph, how do you go about that? You start above board, and Ralph helped me with the reporting on this. Schools that are getting a firm like Learfield or Playfly or Open Doors to help them broker legit third-party deals for their athletes. Big brands, big national brands. Those are the kind of deals that are just going to sail right through CSC and get approved. That's still not enough for some schools. And so what we're starting to see is people either don't believe they're actually going to get caught, that this enforcement thing's actually going to work, or it's like, well, we'll just pay the kids the money and deal with that later. Like we'll punt that down the road. Here's one example from the story, and you can read it on The Athletic. Let's say you're going to pay a player $200,000. That kid his agent might be taking 20%, so that's $40,000. So instead of paying the kid $200K, which goes against your cap, and then he pays the agent, you pay him $160. The collective pays the agent the $40,000. So that's $40,000 less cap hit, right? That's not that nefarious, right? But certainly not the way CSC would have intended it. And then it just goes on from there. But the point is, guys, and as Ralph has reported, right now there is not even they do not have all 68 schools have not yet signed an agreement to let the CSC enforce this NIL stuff, to actually maybe Ralph, you can explain it better than me, but they don't have a signed agreement that would allow them to actually enforce these rules yet.
Yeah, they could do enforcement. The thing is, the agreement puts a little more teeth in the enforcement because the schools would be agreeing, hey, we're going to comply with this enforcement. We're not going to sue, right? Every time you come after us for an investigation, we're going to cooperate with the investigations, and we're not going to sue if we don't like the way the rules are being enforced. So that's the best way to describe it. They could enforce anyway, and they might have to start enforcing without the agreement at some point, or with a watered down version of the agreement. But the agreement would help put a little backbone in the enforcement. That would be the best way I would put it, Stu.
So I think you're going to see the inflated prices, particularly with the quarterbacks. A guy like Brandon Sorsby from Cincinnati, who is good. I wouldn't say he's a superstar. Somebody like that could get $4 million, I think, this year. Whereas we had a few guys get close to that, but not quite last year.
And they weren't superstars either, though.
And they weren't superstars. Well, I mean, Carson Beck was a big name.
He was a big name.
Yeah,
but
he's a big name.
Duke lost more games with Darian Mensah than they did with a guy who ended up at Oregon State and didn't even play there.
Yeah, they won the ACC though. I mean, again, it's a little bit of
it's the ACC, Ralph.
They had a terrible defense. Yeah. Mensah actually played pretty well, but anyway, you could see quarterbacks getting $4 or $5 million this cycle, which is even more than last year. Any guess on either one? You want to guess what Cam Coleman could get?
I would guess he would get about $1 million. People aren't paying. The one who would be very interesting, especially given his comments as we're taping this on Monday, Jeremiah Smith, South Florida native, had talked about, well, if Miami was better when he was asked if Miami was better when he was going through the recruiting process, could he be at Miami? And he kind of engaged that. If Jeremiah Smith went in the portal, I'd be curious what he would be able to command on the open market in 2026. But again, the receivers usually do not go for this kind of money. What's crazy to me is that the quarterbacks that are, you could lump in, you said Sorsby, there's Dylan Raiola, there's probably 4 or 5 other guys that fit into this window. And you're like, wow, somebody may pay them $4 or $5 million. And it's like the chances of them having the season that Fernando Mendoza had is a stretch, right? I mean, to me, it's like, I know of one quarterback because from his old offense coordinator told me this guy got like $1.7 million to go to a Power 4 school. I mean, I didn't really do anything there. Like the quarterback money is something to behold, where guys are getting 7 figures, and a lot of them you're not even sure if they're good enough to be an all-conference quarterback.
Malik Murphy got 1.2 to go to Oregon State last year, and that's on the lower end. So, I think you'll see. I think you'll see a lot of these numbers come because they can't announce yet. They're not even.
Do you guys remember the
portal.
Matthew Sluka story? I know, Stu. I think you and I reported on that with UNLV, and I know Ralph, you were in on it too.
That was Ralph's first. Believe it, I think. Am I right? That was your first athletic byline, the Matthew Sluka story.
It was one of the first. I actually wrote a story and bylined it the first 8 hours I was on the job here. Eric came to me and was like, "Hey, there's this thing. Could you make a few phone calls and make us?" My editor's Eric Single. So that was one of the first reporting jobs I had here. But for my first day on the job, I had a byline.
Okay, this isn't pat yourself on the back segment, Ralph.
I still brought it up. I just brought it up.
No, but I think what you're saying, Bruce, is like the guys, and then we'll turn the table here in a second. But let's see, our guys, Sam Kahn and Antonio Morales had Brendan Sorsby's actually their number 1 ranked QB in the portal right now. But Sam Levitt, Drew Bestemaker, Josh Hoover, Byron Brown, people are going to pay more than they probably should for some of these guys because they're experienced. They've put up numbers. And there's just not going to be that. If you're desperate for Rocco Becht, if you're desperate for a QB, these guys are very experienced, but even if they're not, maybe necessarily future Heisman winners. All right. At long last, the quarterfinals are upon us. We should probably make our pick. So we will do so right after the break. All right, guys, what do you say we talk some actual football? I just think this quarterfinal, all 4 games, this is going to be great. This is what we've been waiting for. And so it's time to do some picks against the spread. And for the first time that I can remember doing this, I have to report that Bruce and I both went 1-3 against the spread in the first round. We got Alabama and we whiffed on the rest. And our colleague Ralph went 4-0. And he has now taken the lead for the first time this season. He has usurped me in the standings. Ralph, you are 30-21. I am 28-23, and Bruce still dragging up the rear at 21-30. So let's get the ball rolling. Literally New Year's Eve. We've got number 2 seed Ohio State is a 9.5 point favorite on number 10 seed Miami. I will start with Bruce.
It's a big number, 9.5. I think Miami might be better on both lines. I think. Given what we saw, how their defensive line got after A&M, and then they ran the ball down the Aggies' throat, especially in the second half with Mark Fletcher. I don't think they'll be able to do that against Ohio State. I do think they can get pressure on Julian Sayin. The number is big. I think Ohio State's going to win this game. I think Ohio State will win it by 2 touchdowns. Here's the thing for me, guys, and I don't know if you feel differently. I think Miami's a really good team. I do not have the kind of confidence in Carson Beck to beat Ohio State's defense. I think it'll cost Miami in the second half. He didn't really turn it over. It was a windy day. He didn't really turn it over in College Station. Obviously, this is a neutral field game, not like playing in Kyle Field. And honestly, the Aggies' third down defense is nasty, but I think Ohio State has even better players than the Aggies do all across their defense. So, Ralph, you're on a hot streak. What do you think is going to happen?
Thanks for that JMU backdoor cover, man. I nailed that one. Which will something that will be on the Athletic posted, probably when you hear this podcast. I tried to do an X factor matchup for each game. And what I honed in on was something that I had honed in on for the Miami Texas A&M game. Miami figured out how to make some chunk runs against Texas A&M, and it totally turned the game around. And it really was the only thing that they managed to do, even though it had been a problem for them all season. I don't think that's going to happen against Ohio State, right? Ohio State does not. In fact, Ohio State has not given up a run, not one run all year of 40 yards or more. That's wild. Like, I think they've only given up 3 of more than 30 yards. So it kind of goes back to this, like, how much can you force Malachi Toney into the game, and how many different ways can you get Malachi Toney the ball? It just seems like, to me, Miami was able to overcome its offensive limitations, not having like very good receivers beyond Malachi Toney, being very reliant on just sort of smashing the ball into the middle of the line. They were able to make that work against Texas A&M because they played so well defensively. I just don't know if that works against Ohio State. So the number is big, and it's probably it's a little scary at 9.5, but I'm going to lay it. And again, sort of like with you, Bruce, think like Beck throws a pick and that gets it to like a 10 to 14 point game. Stu.
Ohio State's going to win. I initially was going to say that we'll cover the spread, but when Bruce said big, Ohio State big, then I'm going to go Miami to cover.
All right.
Okay.
Going against Bruce is not a terrible way of going about this thing.
That's how I'm handling it.
One guy to keep an eye on, Ralph, who Miami's starting to lean on a little more, Elijah Lofton, the tight end. He's a guy they think is pretty talented. I don't know. The thing that's so good about Ohio State, why they don't give up the big runs, because I think they have the most athletic linebackers in the country. Arvell Reese could be first pick in the draft, and Sonny Styles can run like receivers can. And I think that's a big piece of what makes them so good there.
They tackle really well, too. They just don't miss a lot of tackles. So, all right, next up is the game that I will be at, which is the Orange Bowl. You've kind of
become the Oregon beat writer, haven't you?
A little bit. I have spent a lot of my year from Brooklyn following Oregon. This, I think, is the best game on the hardest game to predict on the cards, Stu. So I'm going to start with you and make you predict it. And it's Oregon minus 2.5.
Yeah, it is hard, and I think a part of it is I have a lot of respect for Texas Tech, and I certainly think that defense is very good. But you're always going to have that hesitation of like, but that was in the Big 12. How are they going to stack up against, one of the top teams in the Big 10? And I think at the end of the day, I still have a lot of faith in Texas Tech's defense. But you don't totally shut down the Oregon offense, I don't think. And so then you're relying on an offense that has bogged down a lot in the red zone. That's not necessarily all that consistent. So anyway, all of a long way of saying I'm taking the Ducks to cover the 2.5.
I am leaning towards agreeing with Stu. My biggest pause in this game is both coordinators for Oregon are now head coaches in Power 5 jobs. Will Stein's the head coach at Kentucky, and Tosh Lupoy is the head coach at Cal. Baron Morton has played pretty well. I think the receivers are actually really underrated. I don't think we talk enough about them because we've talked a lot about how dominant the defense is. This is the matchup I love about this game, Ralph, is the Oregon offensive line, which I think feels snubbed. You got Jeff Schwartz and his brethren are like, how come they didn't win the Joe Moore Award? Iowa won it. And then you got a D-line from Texas Tech that is nasty. Alan Bailey, Romello Height. It's like, I don't know how much, that $10 million D-line or whatever they spent, it's been worth it. I think whoever wins that head-to-head in it, I think will win this game. I still lean to the Ducks for lack of a better term, because they've been on this stage and Texas Tech hasn't. It's not a big number. I think Oregon wins. Ralph, are you going to make it all three of us?
Unfortunately, I think I am. To Stu's point, Texas Tech is the one team where you can say this in the quarterfinals where you can say this. They haven't seen anything like this before, right? They have not played a team as good as God bless BYU. And I know BYU fans will be incredibly angry at me for saying this. BYU ain't Oregon, right? BYU doesn't have a potential, top first round draft pick at quarterback. It doesn't have a bunch of NFL players along its offensive line. BYU ain't Oregon. So that conversion is interesting. Like, what does Texas Tech look like against this level of team? The other thing that's interesting to me is the power ratings that I love to look at are all over the place on this game. There are a few that have Texas Tech as the favorite, as like a 4-point favorite. And I've seen some with Oregon favored by as much as 6. So I think because of that, because of a little bit of the unknown with just like how good is this Texas Tech team against this level of opposition, I think that creates some interesting uncertainty. The last thing I'll say, Oregon against the 3 best defenses it faced this year. So that would be Iowa, Indiana, and Washington. Washington's also, like, statistically, Washington was a top 20 defense in yards per play against. So against those 3 teams, I get your point on the Penn State thing, but though Penn State would actually support my point here too. Against those 3 teams, Oregon scored 4 offensive touchdowns. So just something to keep in mind.
In 3 games combined.
In those 3 games against Indiana, Iowa, and Washington, they scored 4 offensive touchdowns.
That's really something, especially since you just think of, like, we were just singing the praise of Dante Moore, right? Like, you think of Oregon having all these offensive weapons. Now they had some receiver injuries, as we talked about, but
line injuries.
You're too close to making me want to switch my pick, but go ahead.
Yeah. And the Penn State game, they only scored 2 touchdowns in overtime. So again, just to give a little bit of pause, I do think like there's a lot of meat on that bone offensively, but I'm going to pick Oregon and we'll be straight across here on the board. And if Texas Tech wins, we'll all look like fools. All right. Next up, we have the Rose Bowl. None of us, well, actually, no. Bruce, you will be at the Rose Bowl, right?
I will be at the Rose Bowl, yes.
Nice. Good sunset. Indiana is a 7-point favorite, and I'm going to start with you, Bruce. I got to tell you, again, my favorite metrics, none of them have this game even as close as 7. The only reason why this game is 7 is because of the helmets. All the numbers say that this should be 8, 9, 10, 12. Like, Indiana is, like I said, I think what's bringing the spread down here is Vegas looking at the helmets and the money coming in, and people, I'm sure, just simply saying, well, how could Indiana, beat Alabama? That doesn't make any sense. So what do you think?
First of all, you may not get the nice sunset because it's supposed to rain later this week out here in Southern California. So
it's just, first they moved it up an hour because God forbid we let them have their sunset in the 3rd quarter. And now it's going to rain. I was looking this up, Bruce. It has not rained since the Joe Germain Ohio State versus Jake Plummer game.
That was the first Rose Bowl game I ever covered.
How heavy was the rain that day?
I don't honestly remember the rain because at the end of the day, it was fine. And I remember leaving Seattle where I lived at the time it was like the blizzard of 95 or whatever. So
here's the really crazy part, right? So that was considered a light rain, I believe. The last time it rained before that at a Rose Bowl game, 1955. So the Rose Bowl is truly cursed if this happens this year, the same year that UCLA is leaving, and just everybody's crapping on my favorite game. Anyway, sorry.
All right. So without that weather forecast, so I did a story that should be up on The Athletic by the time you hear this about Bryant Haynes and Indiana's defense. And he should be the Broyles Award winner as the best defense coordinator in college football. Nobody was sacking Dante Moore till Indiana got him 6 times. They got after Julian Sands, sacked him 5 times. And I think he is really, really good from talking to coaches who have struggled against them. Is you think it's a really vanilla defense, and it's not. The scheme is very complimentary of what it's going to do. He's really good with disguises, really good with breaking his own tendencies. And now he's going to face, this is a great coordinator matchup because you got Ryan Grubb, who does a lot of really cool stuff in the passing game at Alabama. And when Ty Simpson's on, they are dangerous. They do not run the football particularly well. They've been one-dimensional. I think that's a big reason why the spread was as big as it was. Man, it's hard for me to pick against Kalen DeBoer in a big game. But one thing that I think is different, and Bryant Haynes said this at his media availability on Sunday, was when they played Ohio State. He didn't even like really study the film from last year much because Ohio State had changed a lot, and obviously they got him this year. But one thing was the mindset has changed. We're not like last year. He said when they played Ohio State, it was like an underdog mindset, and this year it was like we're going to find a way to win this game no matter what. And I think that has flipped with this team. I expect them to win this game. Again, I don't think they're going to blow out Alabama. I think it'll be a close game, but I'm going to go with Indiana. And I know the spread is what it is, but I'm going to ride the Hoosiers here. Stu?
Same. I think the only, to Ralph's point, I think the only reason the spread is as modest as it is because if they made it double digits, the less sharp gamblers of the world, the public would say, are you crazy? Alabama's not going to lose to Indiana by 10. And everybody would bet on that side of it. The only thing that gives me pause is what happened to Oregon last year, where the team that had the longer layoff just showed up and didn't look anything like they did by the end of the regular season. But otherwise, if you're just talking like, if we're going to see the Indiana we did during the season and the Alabama we did, give me Indiana comfortably.
So if you remember when we did our live show, I was looking for an upset, and this was my upset. It was Alabama beating Indiana. I feel obligated to stick with that. I don't necessarily have a great reason to stick with that. Like, there's nothing about this Alabama team that makes me think, well, I shouldn't say that. No, here's what makes me think they have a chance to win this game, and that is it's Alabama. They're not going to be in any way overwhelmed athletically. Like, they will have athletes who will be able to match Indiana's athletes, right? They have NFL type players. So they don't have to worry about being outclassed athletically, like maybe some teams might be by Indiana. But listen, do I go into this making this pick and taking Alabama? If nothing else, I'll take them to cover, right? Do I go into this, really confident with a lot of great reasoning? No, it's a matter of like, I feel like I got to pick an upset somewhere in here. So here we go. But it's going to be tough. I mean, Indiana is going to need to play one of their poorer games to give Alabama a chance. Oklahoma came unraveled in the first round, right? And that allowed Alabama to get back in the game and seize control. Like, Indiana just doesn't do that very often. Like, even in their games, like they don't give you a whole lot of freebies. So yeah, I'll stick with my original pick, and I'll stick with the upset, and I'll look like a genius when it happens, but more likely than not, I'm going to look like a dope for even trying it.
No, there's actually a reasonable script to what you're predicting, which is this. I've always said all along, Indiana, as talented as you're very talented, but do they have the depth of an Alabama or a Georgia or Ohio State? Well, we're going to find out, right? They lost their top pass rusher, celebrating the win.
Yeah, Stephen Daly.
Stephen Daly, who was already taking over for Kellen Wyatt, who was lost for the season. So now you're down to your third string pass rusher. And if suddenly like the Indiana that we saw, do what they did against Julian Sayin isn't that, and Ty Simpson has time to pass, and he's got a couple really good receivers, like that's the recipe to your upset, I think.
Thanks. We'll see. I'm not feeling overly confident, but for people who I'm still relatively new to the show, but for people who are getting used to me, you have to understand when it comes prediction time, I'm always going to do something a little weird because I just think that's the fun of predicting things. Like, I just don't think there's any fun. Yeah,
you're in first place with that approach.
I don't think there's anything
for
fun.
The prediction on our show, and I picked Tulane, which got blown out at Ole Miss, to go to Ole Miss and win the game, which obviously did not happen. So fun and stupid can be two different things. Yeah,
I do think I'm definitely straddling that line on between fun and stupid here. Okay, final game of the night is in the Sugar Bowl, and it's an SEC matchup. It's a rematch of a regular season game, which, it was a great regular season game, one of the best of the year, Ole Miss against Georgia. But, rematches are always a little bit disappointing. It's cool that it's in the Sugar Bowl because it means a lot of Ole Miss fans will be there. Georgia's a 6.5 point favorite. Bruce, who you got?
I got Georgia. I mean, I think it would be an amazing story if Pete Golding and Ole Miss won this game. Nobody was surprised that they were going to beat Tulane without Lane Kiffin, but given that subplot, which is more than a subplot. I don't know. I look at Georgia and I just feel like they're getting better and better. And I think they do have a ton of athletes. And I think quietly, you look at Gunnar Stockton and how well he has played. I feel like he doesn't get enough credit for what he's done. I'm not saying they're going to blow them out, but if you told me the spread was 12 or 13, I would be like, I would still take Georgia. Stu?
Okay, I'm going to throw a stat at you from my Georgia superfan friend, Jonathan. Georgia trailed Ole Miss 35-26 entering the fourth quarter of that game on October 14th. In the 25 quarters since then, they outscored them 17-0 in the fourth quarter that night, and in total have outscored their opponents 196-70 since then. Just a complete transformation into a dominant Georgia team. I will take them to cover the 6.5. Ralph.
That's cool. And I might steal that stat from your friend because I was writing about one of the things in the story that's going to post tomorrow is using that game as the pivot point for Georgia. Really, Georgia's defense.
Really was.
Yeah, Georgia's defense was kind of, bad against Tennessee, had a very bad half against Alabama, had given up 5 straight touchdowns. The first 5 times Ole Miss touched the ball, they scored touchdowns, and then 2 3-and-outs, Georgia scores, flips the game around, and they've been on their way ever since. And they really have been a different team ever since. So I'm going to take Georgia as well. The one thing we have said all year about Ole Miss is this defense is, it's okay. It's a fine defense, but there's not a lot of difference makers on it, unlike last year's team. And the way Georgia's been rolling along, their defense playing better. They seem to have an identity on offense with Stockton. Like I just feel like it's going to be hard for Ole Miss to keep up offensively with a defense that doesn't get enough stops. So
can I ask
we'll
you
go
guys
across
a question?
the board for Georgia.
Ask you a question. What would the spread have had to be for you guys to take Ole Miss? Where's the breaking point? Because I think we all look at this and go, we would have the spread higher than 6.
I think if it had gotten a little closer to 2 touchdowns.
Like if it was 10 points, you would probably still take in Georgia, right? Based off the way you're talking.
I think I might have gone up to 10, which again, yeah. But
I'm not
what do you
that
think,
way.
Stu? Oh no. Okay.
If you made it 8.5, I would probably take Ole Miss. I don't
really.
I think I'm higher on Ole Miss than you guys, and I have been for some time. Trinidad Chambliss is special. Kewan Lacey is special. Like I'm not brushing them off like some people are. I mean, what Tulane may not be that great, but what they did to them was pretty impressive. But if it was going to be a touchdown or lower, I was going to take Georgia.
Yeah, I think I would have gone a little, but that actually I think suggests maybe where the surprise will be this weekend, right? Because I do think you and I are more conventional wisdom here, Bruce, insofar as I think most people are in our camp. That if we would not only take Georgia, but we would take Georgia even with a few more points involved here. So yeah, I think but again, that to me suggests maybe this is where the surprise will come, because I just think people are coalescing, to use that word again, around this idea that, man, Georgia down the stretch, they're becoming a wagon.
Let me hijack the podcast for 2 seconds on this. You guys don't know it's coming, but I want to ask you it. Who do you think after these 4 games will be the person, could be a coach, could be a player, that the college football world will be buzzing about?
So
because if Stu's right and Ole Miss somehow wins the game, I think Charlie Weiss Jr. could be the guy people would be buzzing about if they ended up doing that. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen, but the way I feel like he's kind of positioned himself.
Yeah, that would make some sense, because again, like if he comes out there and really like takes apart Kirby's defense, that would be a real statement. I mean, is it fair to say Dante Moore? Probably not, because I think it's not like Dante Moore is coming out of nowhere. But I do wonder if he goes out and beats Texas Tech, that sort of seals him as the big star of the remaining playoff.
Ralph, I can help you out on this. This is what I thought you were going to say.
Mm-hmm.
Ty Simpson, if he leads his team to do something that Julian Sand and Dante Moore could not do, Ty Simpson all of a sudden becomes, again, I don't want to jump this too far, becomes the guy people say, ooh, he might be first pick of the draft guy.
And there's also
I see where this is headed.
Yeah, and there's also no other path for Alabama too, right? Because you're right, they're not going to suddenly like, well, we've just figured out how to run the ball after 14 weeks against the best run defense in the country. So yeah, that's true. Like the only path for Alabama is a big Ty Simpson game, Stu.
This is exactly, I now see how this is going to play out. If Alabama wins and if Oregon wins, the next morning, all the draft guys who spent however long.
The next morning, that night, Stu.
It's not as Mendoza's. No, it's not Mendoza anymore. It's pick one of the other two. Like, we're out on Mendoza. We're in on Ty Simpson or Dante Moore. That's your QB1 now. That's what's going to happen.
There's a lot. And if you watch Ty Simpson, there is a lot for NFL people to be like, ooh, those are some big time throws he makes. And he's really athletic. Of the three of those quarterbacks, him, Dante Moore, and Mendoza, he's the best runner of the three.
If you look back over Alabama's season, though, I feel like he had a great game against Georgia in Georgia, and that's kind of when everybody jumped on his bandwagon. He did not have a lot of big games, really, the rest of the way, though his playoff performance against Oklahoma was probably his best game in a long time. All right. By the time we revisit with you guys, we're going to do a late night episode on New Year's Day. If you are somebody who is going to be too wired to go to bed after, 14 hours or whatever it will be of football, we will be there live on YouTube at Audible Show. And maybe we'll be able to squeeze in a little time I just think something's going to happen in the Citrus Bowl or the ReliaQuest Bowl it's not just the playoffs. It's going to be a great, great 2 days of football. So hope you guys can join us. I can't give you an exact time. Just be ready sometime after that last game on New Year's Day. We will join you then. We'll see you then.